So we're continuing this conversation on what is supposed to be the afterlife, but I think has become more about life. And we're having this very, very beautiful conversation, and it's gone a lot of different places, and I'm not sure where today's conversation is going to go, but I want to start off today by talking about consciousness. One of the things that I want to do in continuing this conversation is I want to go deeper into our exploration of the nature or the thematic nature of the soul. So in the broadest sense, the historical development of Jewish philosophy and thought can be broken down into three general areas: biblical, Talmudic, and then the post-Talmudic period. So the biblical period begins some 3,300 years ago with the Exodus from Egypt, and it concludes about 2,500 years ago with the destruction of the first temple. So the biblical period lasts around 1,300 years, 12 to 1,300 years. Then that entire era is known as the age of the prophets. As prophecy came to a close in the Talmudic age, the sages began to take shape, starting with the period of what we call in Aramaic the Tanaim, which were the original teachers of the oral law, and through the Amoraim, which were the interpreters. The Amoraim were the authors of the Talmud. And so the era of the Tanaim lasted for about 2 centuries. It came to an end with the death of the great Rabbi Yehuda Anasi, who passed away in the year 219 CE. And the period of the Amoraim, the Talmudic scholars, the Talmudic sages, came to a close with the completion of the Talmud about 1,500 years ago in the year 500 CE. That's when the Talmud was completed. So following the conclusion of the publication of the Talmud, the so-called modern or post-Talmudic period began. And it ranged from the medieval times to present. And in this period, of which we are part of, there appears to be two predominant trends of thought: the mystical, Kabbalistic, and the rational, philosophical. Two distinct trends of thought in the Jewish world. Now,
Kabbalistic and
the mystical and the rational, or rational slash, let's say, philosophical.
Thank you.
Now, my aspiration in this conversation and continuing this conversation is to demonstrate the nature of the soul according to the way that it's represented in traditional sources. So we spoke about this before, but biblical texts, for the most part, shy away from offering particular details regarding the nature of the soul or the nature of the afterlife. At most, the biblical text may drop a coded hint or a symbolic allusion. And later on, you'll find that little hint will be explored by the Talmudic sages or by the sages of the mystical teachings. And all of a sudden, that little drop in the Torah becomes an entire teaching. Now, due to this developmental nature of the ideas that are communicated by and that are within the canon of Jewish thought, our journey towards discovering the nature of self and the nature of soul needs to begin with the Talmudic sources. So if we're going to start really understanding the afterlife, we need to understand the soul. And if to do it properly, because like I said, we have the luxury of time here, and I wanted to do this properly and go through it properly. So I want to start from the earliest conversation that we can start with. And I think the best conversation would be the Talmudic sources. So the first Talmudic conversation is in Brachot, actually in our Talmud. We're going to get there soon. It's the Brachot in 61a. And there's a conversation about ego and transcendence there. Now, we have to recognize that there is an existential conflict and a duality that exists within the human heart. The sages of the Talmud saw this duality as two competing internal forces. They called one the Yetzer Tov, the good inclination, and the other one the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination. But essentially, again, it's very easy to think of them as a little red guy with a pitchfork and the other one a little flying guy on the other side. Let's take that out of our conversation, because really what we're talking about is a conflict, an existential conflict, a duality within the heart. It's not without, it's not over our shoulder, it's within. And the reason why I want to say that is because so often we think of these kinds of ideas as without us. Oh, they're over our shoulder, they're over there. It's not me, it's just something beyond me. No, this is me. This is me. It's a duality in my heart. It's a struggle that and I'm not alone, because every human being has the same struggle as me. Maybe it's different in the way that it's manifested, but the struggle is the same. And that in my heart, there are competing internal forces. Now, I want to go a little further into the model before I take some of your questions. I know I could see there's some questions lingering here. According to the Talmudic scholars, the model, or let's say the human psyche, has a noble and good inclination. This noble and good inclination has a proclivity towards performing positive and life-affirming actions. This inclination is driven towards transcendence. We have a desire. Part of this duality within our heart is a desire to be driven towards transcendence. And at the same time, we have an ego-driven inclination, a force that desires and craves survival on the level of the physical. And this inclination is fixated on the preservation and the protection of the ego. That's all it really wants. It's trying to protect the ego. It's trying to protect the sense of individual self, or this personal I. So let me simplify it. We can say that the one inclination is the transcendent, the inner oriented, self, and the other inclination is the outer oriented, the ego, the perception of self. So there is the inner oriented self, and then there's the outer oriented self. The inner oriented self is selfless, it's altruistic, it's other oriented, and the ego or outer oriented self is self-centered. It's not self-centered in a negative way. It just wants to satisfy its own appetite. It's like survival. And I think it's also important to note that for so many years, we didn't have this luxury. Survival was where we were at. The concept and the conversation about transcendence wasn't possible because we weren't sure where our next meal was coming from. And so our ego-centered existence needed to be the primary function of our existence, because otherwise we wouldn't be eating tomorrow. But today, at least in our conversation, and thank God for all of us that are sitting here in this room, we don't have that problem. And so we have a luxury, we have a privilege to be able to have a new conversation that's not based on survival, that's based on transcendence. And I think that though we can say it's a privilege that we need to look towards and desire and see beyond the survival. Questions? Wow. Okay. Oh.
Rabbi, you know how we're supposed to trust that, our parnasah is given to us because
Our livelihood, yeah. I just wanted to translate that, yeah.
Sorry, thank you. Like, it's not even given to me. It's given to me based on the needs of my children. And so I'm just the messenger, so I can provide for what these two souls need in this material world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been working very hard on some projects, but for the same guy, and I invoiced him. I left the amount of about $15,000 on April 30th, and the money never came. And I was like, I don't like going after money, like reminding people they need to pay me, even though sometimes, sadly, you have to do that. But and the funny thing is, like, at some point he said, "Oh, you will be paid on Friday." And on Friday, I was left with maybe $1,000 on my bank account. Okay, so when you say that the ego has to provide for tomorrow, yes, and like today we don't have that issue. Well, sometimes we do, especially when we work for ourselves. Bottom line is, I was curious during the weekend to check my accounts, to check whether the guy, and I said, no, you're not going to do it, because I trust that I will never be left in a situation where I can't put food on the table. It has never happened, even when the situation seemed difficult, and it will not happen. I know for a fact that it will not happen. As a matter of fact, I checked only on Monday. The money wasn't there, but I started receiving the invoice, like the messages from his accountant that they were being paid. So my point is, even today, we still have sometimes to, worry, but I think that what your teachings have given us, and I'm including myself in the us, or maybe I should say myself, what they've taught me is to trust that good is good and will always be good. And if there's a delay, there's also a lesson for me to learn into that. But mainly, I will never be left without an ability to provide.
Thank you. And I want to clarify that by worrying, you make that worry real.
Yes. And the situation unbearable when it doesn't need to be.
That's right. Because God does not have debt. God does not remain in, as we say in Hebrew, a Baal Chov. God doesn't have debt. And so, yeah, maybe it's true that that person who owes you money at that particular moment will not be the messenger for your sustaining experience. But someone else will have that privilege.
Even in the moments that seemed the most dire to me, all of a sudden something always appeared. And that I have proof of experience to speak about that. But I'm sure, and certainly your teachings have also helped me in comforting my experience. And so when my brain goes a little cuckoo, saying, no, come on, I'm like, no, you will get it in due time. When it is your time to get that, that's exactly when you're going to get it. So
exactly.
You should worry because you are getting it.
It's absolutely. I'll tell you a personal story. There was one time in my life that I had done I'd done something, and I got a windfall of money. Generally, I don't go after money. It's not something that I value. And so, but Sarah and I had decided we had done something, and we had a windfall of money. The day that we got that check, somebody called me and he said, I have to come see you. And he said he was in dire straits. And it's not something I get in this situation, and that he wanted to start a business and he needed to borrow money. Now, people don't generally ask me to borrow money. The amount of money that he wanted was exactly the amount of money that I had just gotten. And he said he needed to borrow for 3 weeks. I didn't think twice. I said, here it is. God gave it to me to give to you. He never paid it back. And I probably knew at the time he wasn't going to pay it back. But what I knew also is that money, yeah, maybe I can say that it's a nice cushion, it's a nice feeling, it's that God gave it to me so I could have a little bit of a feeling of not to worry. I don't know. Do I hold a resentment towards that person? No, not at all. That because it's hard. Look, I'll tell you, I went through different times where I said, oh, should I go after him? Should I? No, you know what? What is it already? And I see, and I have had the privilege of spending a lot of times with families who have to deal with estates. And I see the amount of fighting that happens. And what is it? This is real people that you love. This is your family. This is people who are close to you. And you're going to separate, and you're going to fight over money. There was a study that was done a number of years ago, and I forgot the number, but I believe the number is $75,000, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
If you have $75,000, if you make $75,000, anything above that, it would take a significant amount of money to increase your quality of life. Like from 75, you'd have to go to I think $500,000, if I remember correctly, in order to increase that quality of life. And I think it's a very powerful conversation that we need to have, because there's always this feeling money is like chesed in our conversation, in our Kabbalistic conversation. What we know about chesed, what we know about loving kindness, is it has no end. There's no end to it. So you're never going to be satisfied. But if you can use Gevorah that severity. What is Gevorah? It's this stop of loving kindness. Now, it's not only, we say, oh, loving kindness is saying yes. Chesed is saying yes, and Gevorah is saying no. That's not what it is. Well, it's also what it is. But what it also is, aside for that, is it's the ability to say no to yourself sometimes. No, I don't need more. I'd rather spend time here living and pursuing a more meaningful, a more purposeful life than spend my time living and pursuing a more stable monetary life. Because the truth is, the extra hour, yeah, maybe I would have made, I don't know, whatever that is, but it's not going to increase my quality of life to the fraction, and maybe I'm speaking for myself, but to the fraction that having this conversation that we're having now about meaning and purpose is going to do. That, in my opinion, is so much more valuable financially than that extra $100 would be. And it's hard. It's hard because when you have $1,000 left in the account, you have two choices, and you did the right choice. Don't look, because the magic can't happen if you look. If you're constantly checking your account every single moment, then the magic can't happen. God will take care of you. And you close your eyes and you say, God, I'm yours. You take care of me.
Actually, I have a better one. Rabbi, I say thank you for taking care of me.
There it is. It's already done. It's already done. Love
Now
it.
that thank you is in debt with me.
Love it. It's already done. It's not even a conversation. Yes, absolutely.
It's not about please God take care of me. It's thank you for taking care of me.
That's it. Exactly. Exactly. It's like the kid who wants the candy. So what do? They make a blessing, and then they already make the blessing. The parent doesn't want the kid to make the blessing in vain. So the parent has no choice but to give the candy.
Amazing.
But then the same blessing on candy is the same blessing on other things. So you can,
So you can give them a banana instead?
No, banana is not the same blessing, but salami is. Fami, tell me.
Good morning.
Good
Nice
morning.
to see you. Nice to see you. I'm
Very good
happy.
to see you. Good to have you back. What's happening?
So, I was studying deeply this thing like lately. Here's my question. So, if you want to fight an enemy, you have to see it first, right? You cannot fight an enemy which you cannot see it. You have to.
You don't have to see the enemy to fight it. You have to know the enemy exists to fight it.
Yes. Okay. Sorry. Yes.
No, I'm only clarifying it because it's important to remember that you don't have to actually see it. You just have to know that it exists.
I mean, you see it metaphor. I mean,
yes. More metaphorically. Yes, you're right. Okay.
So how to recognize? So since every decision is a fight between these two entities, or this the good and the bad, how to recognize that? Okay, maybe what my intuition is, it's bad. How to recognize that? I mean, what's coming from inside you, it's good or bad? How can you?
If you question whether it's good or bad, then you have to educate yourself to know better what is good and bad. And I think that is a great indicator. If you're not sure if this is good or bad, then you need to explore and find out, is this good or bad? I mean, there's certain indicators. For example, if it's making you depressed, it's probably not very good. If it's bringing you down, if it's not allowing you to achieve your purpose in this world, it's probably not good. But sometimes we have these experiences in order to balance us out, because that's the human condition. We are not supposed to be perfect. That is not our job in this world. Our job is not to achieve perfection. Our job is to achieve better. That to live within this world, within all the dirt and the grum and the grind of this world and to be able to uplift it and make it better. So it's not to be perfect, because if we were perfect, then we would have nothing else to refine, then we wouldn't be here. So these challenges are going to happen because there needs to be the yin and yang. There needs to be the back and forth. There needs to be the good and the bad in order for us to be able to navigate what is being better, what is my purpose, what is my world. So this is really important. But if you're not sure what's good and bad, well, that takes education. That's not going to happen overnight.
But sometimes I was referring to, sometimes you become angry. Sometimes you feel, somebody is like, how I can say it? I was studying this, and one rabbi explained, people say, okay, you know what? It's not myself. I lost my cool, once you calm down, you say, you know what? I'm sorry. So this is like a typical example of Gevorah.
Right. So there you go. You know that anger in all states, in all conditions, anger is from the Yetzer Hara. It's from the selfish, egotistical side. We know that.
Yeah.
Because someone who is not selfish can't get angry. What are you going to get angry about? Try somebody who has the humility. Try to anger them. See what happens.
And also, I learned that even, which is awesome, even bad can be good.
Bad very often. It's Gevorah. It's not bad. It's the stop of loving kindness. It's the Gevorah. It's the severity. It's not bad. It looks like it's bad. It's the parent taking the knife out of a 2-year-old's hand. The 2-year-old starts crying, but the 2-year-old doesn't realize the knife is dangerous. They don't have that intellectual ability. Well, we also are a 2-year-old in a certain way. There are certain knives that are in our hands of which we don't realize are dangerous. So we need that. And yes, maybe we'll cry, but that's okay too. Because our parents, God knows what's right for us. So if you think of that experience as if you're a 2-year-old with a knife in your hand, well, think about just think about somebody. The Rebbe said this as an example. Think about somebody who never saw surgery before that walks into a surgery. What are they going to see? They're going to see a guy with his hands and feet tied down, somebody in a white coat or scrubs standing over him, cutting away. You say, you murderer, murderer. No, it's probably this person. The Rebbe says this person probably paid dearly and waited a long time for this moment. But if you never understood, if you never saw surgery or never knew what surgery was, it would be easy to look at that and say, this is terrible. This is a horrible thing. It's only because your education and your eyes are not understanding of that moment and the beauty and the health benefits and how this person is, God willing, going to come out of that surgery better and healthier than before.
But something else which I learned, which is awesome, is we can use bad for good. It's good to use bad for good.
Yes.
So if we study, our favorite history, which is Joseph. At the end, when he was with his brothers, he put a cup and he in one of their camels, and he said, you see what I mean? And he said, you are a thief. But the purpose was not the purpose is to bring his father, so it's good to use bad for good, which is all good.
Absolutely. Thank you. Cheryl, I think you're next.
Yeah.
Bruce. Okay.
Yeah.
Good morning, Bruce. How are you?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Couple points. One was the 75,000 you said. The thing I had heard is if money makes you happier up to about 75,000.
Okay, there you go.
In other words, the amount that it took to keep you comfortable. After that, there's absolutely zero correlation between more money and happiness.
Thank you for clarifying that. So that's what it is. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, the other thing, couple quick stories. One is one time we were wondering about, Cheryl was in another room saying, oh, we got to transfer money tomorrow so we can write a check to cover our grandson's camp. And I opened the mail. And it was one of these things, if you ever own a stock and there's a lawsuit, usually you get nothing or you get $2. There was the exact amount that we owed for the camp. And I said, Cheryl, God just gave you this for the camp.
Wow.
You can relax tonight.
Wow.
I mean, it was almost to the penny. So, and then the other thing was we had in our synagogue in Florida, there was a man who was in a bad situation, like your story. He said he had lost his home. He said he didn't have a bed to sleep on. And we said, we have an air mattress. And Cheryl said, and I told Cheryl, I said, realize that if we give this, there is a better than even chance we're not going to get it back. And I mean, it was more of a pain, actually. I had to drive from where we were an hour home, an hour back to get it to him. And then he goes, how am I going to get it upstairs? I go, I have a bad back. I can't get it upstairs for you. You're going to have to do something on your own. Obviously, we never got it back again. The saddest point was we never saw the man again coming to synagogue. I mean, that bothered me more than not getting the air mattress back. I didn't really care. The fact that for some reason, whether he felt shame of not coming back because he wasn't going to give that back to me or whatever it was, but we saw him several times. And after that, never saw him again.
I often think about people who are in need and how difficult it is and how shameful it is to ask. And very often the person who gives is the person you don't want to see again. I understand that it's harder for the receiver to look at the giver than it is for the giver to look at the receiver.
It's right what you're saying. About 3 years ago, a friend of mine needed to go to Italy because her mother had a stroke, and for whatever reason, her husband wouldn't give her the money to pay for the ticket. So I didn't dig too long with myself. I said, how can you have on a conscience that this person you care for may not see her mother before she passes? So I've paid it was Christmas time. You can imagine the fees. and she promised she would give it back to me. And then it never happened. And then she disappeared, and at some point I was a bit upset that, because it's not that I was flowing myself on gold that I could spare $3,000 for. I wouldn't pay it for myself, but I mean, if I had to go for health reasons, I would pay it for myself. But then I thought to myself, do you really care about $2,800 when you have given the gift to a mother and to a daughter to say goodbye before she passed? That's all you care for. Those 2,000 whatever have absolutely no meaning for you, but they meant the world to somebody else.
Yeah.
So the person disappeared as a result of that. It probably, as you said, from the shame of not being able to return it. But I sleep well at night.
Yeah. And sometimes I think, and thank God that we're all able to talk about being givers, but for somebody, and I try to empathize with somebody who's in a situation where they have to take, and how complicated and how difficult it is. If they don't have a conscience, well, they don't have a conscience, nothing you can do about that. But if you have a little bit of a conscience, that's a very humbling experience to have to lower yourself to be able to ask.
Listen, I receive all the time.
Not in that way.
I've had to ask, but to my mother, which is different.
Different. That's different. It's a parent's responsibility to a child to make sure they're okay. It's a parent. It's not a responsibility. Yes, responsibility, but also it's innate for a parent. But to have to humble yourself to somebody that is not a parent or not somebody who it's innate. It's a very hard thing to do. Very hard thing to do.
Yep.
Kelsey, you're waiting a long time.
Well, I guess this is kind of a question or observation that I've wondered about over my experiences since taking your classes. Because like when we're put in certain situations where we react in our survival, fight or flight, which is caused by chemical reactions in our brain. So is it possible to refine ourselves enough through like teachings like this, that whenever those chemicals are sent through our brains, that we don't react in such a primal way?
I think so. I mean, if the ability that we have to become better and to refine ourselves is possible, then why can't we, through teaching and through putting that teaching into practice, actually cause it that the point that where we have a instinct, that our instinct changes? I think it's possible. Bruce, what do you think? You think it's possible?
Oh, on what? Would you repeat that again?
Do you think that
I was reading the
do you
chat.
think it's possible to change the fight or flight mechanism within the brain through teachings? By the way,
Yeah.
I'm asking Bruce because he's a
I
doctor.
think some of it, right,
Yeah.
some of it is, I think, obviously, some of it we, inherited it, or God gave it to us and made us that way to protect us. But I think some of it we can change by teachings, certainly.
Yeah, I
I think so.
You didn't ask me.
didn't
I'm
ask you.
Yeah,
I'm not a medical person, but I
but she's
definitely,
married to one, so she has a lot of information.
no, I think that when you pause in a situation rather than just reacting, give yourself that, whatever, 5-second pause and maybe take a deep breath. It kind of clears the brain somewhat and calms you down so you could make a rational decision rather than whatever it is, barking back at somebody or fighting. I think if you know that it's a dangerous situation, your body's just going to flee anyway, that fight or flight. But if you're put in a odd situation where you just don't know how to respond, I think you just need time to clear your brain and react or respond. That's my theory.
Yeah, going from instinct to rational. That's a really good, Cheryl. I think that's a really good process where we often just react. And I like that idea. Take a step back, take a moment, even if it's 5 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Think and then respond. Stop and think. It's a good. Kelsey, does that help?
It does. I was speaking more to the situations where we don't really, like not really the ability to stop and think, because they're more of the situations, I guess, where your true fight or flight response would be triggered. So
I still do think that it's possible to change. I do think I don't know it. I don't have any studies that I have at my fingertips. I can look at it later, but there must be a way.
it seems like it, but like that would be more of a refinement of the soul, and the soul uses the body,
Yeah.
to act.
I
Anyway.
think the teachings we're learning here help us put a distance between truth and the material world, and as we go and we absorb them, we have a lot more tools to control that instinct, getting nervous, getting upset at somebody, reacting immediately, running from a situation. And I think that, at least it is my experience. I'm your case study if you want. but I really see that an application of the principles that we learn here have really improved my quality of life. I'm becoming less of my enemy. I will always be my worst enemy, but I mean, figuratively speaking, of course, but I think I'm becoming less of one every day thanks to the teachings.
Jill.
So I have seen a study, it's from a number of years ago at this point, where they put people in an MRI where they were doing mantras and meditating, and they absolutely saw changes in the brain. I think these teachings are kind of our meditations. I know with me, they stick with me all week. And I feel like that's the best meditation when it can be done within your life. It's great to sit for 20 minutes or 30 minutes, but to have them happen all the time, like Cheryl said, take that 5 seconds, that's a meditation. I think we're shifting our brains all the time. And I think when we do it constantly, I have found anyway, it tends to be deeper. I see myself responding differently in the same situations where I might have responded another way. And, to speak with Kelsey, I think that must change, whether it's on the soul level or some chemical process. I'm not sure what the difference is at this point. And I know people do have some very intense challenges around, mental health, whether it's chemical, but I think there's so much overlap. So I think these teachings are or can be a meditation and absolutely can shift us. So that's what I've seen.
Thank you.
So
Thank you. It's so hard. It's so hard. And I feel so fortunate that we can be here and we can do this. It's so hard to look within, to take an idea that's not ours, that maybe we hear or we study, and to turn that into experience, to turn that into something that is going to change us. And I think that's really what Kelsey is trying to figure out, which is such a great challenge. It could be a life challenge. It could be the reason why it's bothering you so much, because it's part of your purpose, is to be able to really to retrain yourself. It could be that based on your nature, or it could even be your nurture. It could be something, I don't want to go Freudian on us here, but it could be something from our childhood. But for some reason, if it is something that resonates with you and it bothers you, then it's exactly what Kabbalah teaches, is that integration. We've talked about this so many times, is the idea of integrating something that you study into your action, into who you are. It's such a hard thing, is to actually go through it. I mean, to hear something and to have knowledge is a wonderful, wonderful thing. But then to take what you know and to integrate that, that's hard. I mean, Aristotle, I told this story in one of the classes last week, but Aristotle had a hard time. One time, I'll tell the story again because I think it's such an important, and here's the great Aristotle. One of his teachers one of his students saw him doing an immoral act. And he said, "Teacher, how can you do this?" And he said, "Right now, I'm not Aristotle the philosopher. I'm not Aristotle." And I think that, yes, he's talking about something so profound that you can study and study and study, and you can learn all the greatest materials of the world, of which we are so grateful that today we have at our fingertips information like we've never had before. But it doesn't mean integration. It doesn't mean that what we study becomes who we are. What Kabbalah wants from us, what Jewish philosophy wants from us, is to be able to integrate what we study into who we are, especially if it's something that resonates with us. And that is not something that's going to happen overnight, because it could be that it's something that is so challenging for us that maybe the first day we can do it for 5 seconds, and the second day maybe for 6 seconds, but go to doing it every day for 30 days, well, we may end up getting to a minute. You're saying, wow, it's only a minute. No, it's not only a minute. That's huge. And sometimes we're looking for the big picture instead of focusing on that little thing, and say, wow, last time I reacted this way, and this time, what did Cheryl said before? It's 5 seconds. So it may take 5 days to be able to change 5 seconds, but 5 seconds is changing everything. We're not looking for 5 years. We're not even looking for 5 minutes, just 5 seconds. Just being able to change the fight or flight or that initial reaction. And it may take years and years of trying. If it's really part of your life's mission, it's not going to be easy. And giving up because it didn't work the first or second time, well, if you could just fix it with 1 or 2 times, then it's a wonderful thing, but it's not part of your purpose. If it's part of your purpose, it's going to take a while to fix it, and it's going to keep on coming back. So if there's certain themes that if you can articulate this, it's an amazing, amazing gift. That there's certain things themes that keep on coming back into your life for particular reasons. If that's the case, there's no question it's part of your life's purpose. And this duality that exists within us, it's our sonar. It's there to help us navigate. It's there to help us try to figure all this out. So it's the gift. These are all gifts that are given to us. These are our tools.
So, Rabbi, it's funny because you mentioned that when you learn something, we also have to teach it to somebody else to make sure.
The best way to learn is to teach.
So this morning I was telling Yarin he has to come to Naomi's bat mitzvah breakfast. And of course he started complaining about this and that and that. And I said, I don't get it. You don't know anybody there. You haven't been, you don't know what's the plan. And yet all you have to say are negative things. So first of all, please don't put ideas into her head because she didn't even explain that she has to go. So why are you, And then I'm like, and you know what, better yet, it would be nice not only not to say them, but not to think them.
Exactly.
How about we learn to think good as opposed to think negative about a situation before we even speak?
I know that, and because I know how old Yarin is, so to say this to a teenager, don't worry about it. Say it every single day. They're not going to get it, but you're going to help. That is a great opportunity that we have as parents of teenagers to be able to reinforce and reinforce and reinforce, and they're still going to do the same thing. But you just keep on reinforcing it because it will settle in. It will settle in, and something will change. And that's a great gift that we can give to our kids in that time of adolescence where there's so many different changes that are happening that are, that we all forgot about it, but it's a hard time.
It's a hard time.
It's a hard time.
Yarin seems to be coasting through it. I think he has a harder time than it appears. And I find that even, going back to Kelsey's question about, being able to control my own reactions through the teachings is helping me be a better version of a mom to my teenage boy, then I would had I not been on this path. Not saying I'm a good mom. I'm not saying I'm a better mom. I'm saying I'm a better version of what I could be in if it wasn't for the silence that I have in my head, thanks to our classes.
And that's what it is, better. That's the key word, better. Not perfect, not best, just better.
Yeah.
Fami.
Thank you. So Cheryl gave the beautiful and perfect answer. So this is how, if it can help Kelsey. So good and bad. So for bad to win, or for the bad, it have to lie a lot. So if you characterize the bad is something which is like based on illusions, based on something very realistic, but it's dressed like so nice that it confuses you. So the best answer is to stop and think. Stop and think.
I love it.
Yeah, this is like the perfect, what Cheryl gives this, like spot on.
Don't forget, Fami, if you stop to think, don't forget to start again. Okay, sorry. That was a bad joke.
Thank you, but it's a beautiful answer, Cheryl.
Yeah, thank you. Cheryl.
Thank you, Fami. My question has more to do with the classes, because Bruce and I just had this conversation last night about how I do take away so many. It doesn't matter what class we're in, but even if I take away nuggets or if I remember some of it, and he said something about, I don't understand the Kabbalah part. And he said, I think I really need more Torah. And I said that you usually integrate the two for newbie class people like us taking classes like this, which is so heavy-headed, but I love this. It's much more cerebral. I'm not good at interpretations of Torah, although I go to Torah study, it still sometimes go over my head. But you said something today that I think, if I understand correctly, is Kabbalah basically the integration of Torah into your daily life? If you had to put it in a nutshell, is that a correct response?
So, for example, just to give you an example, today I didn't teach any Kabbalah. I just mentioned a Kabbalistic idea. And today was all I only what I taught was from the Talmud, was actually oral law.
Okay.
So you can call it, I think that often the semantics get to us, where we hear a word and we just kind of turn off because of a word that, I don't understand, that's too esoteric for me. Even the word esoteric is too esoteric for me. But I think that it's important. So yes, I am, the way that there's a couple of things when I first started teaching, especially since I end up teaching a lot of people who Hebrew is not familiar to them. So there's a couple of things that I started. For example, is you'll very rarely hear me talk Hebrew. And that's because I know how difficult it is to be studying and hear another language. You feel like you can have a train of thought and all of a sudden you're lost because you didn't understand that. So the only time I would ever talk Hebrew is if I'm going to use it as a concept and then translate it right away. And I'm very conscious of that. And I think that and I thank you for observing this. And I think you're right. It's a very important process, and it's a hard process, because obviously it's much easier to just take a text and to read it and to translate it, and then you can figure it out. But if the point of all of this is to integrate it, then these conversations are critical to that. So it's not just the point of Kabbalah, it's the point of all of Torah, which means the point of Torah study in any place, in any time. There was a great, the Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi one day said to his students, you should live with the times. And they didn't understand what that meant. What should we do? Should we get a newspaper? Like, what does that mean, live with the times? And they asked his brother-in-law, and he said, you should live with the Torah portion of the week and integrate it into your life. And that's hard, to just take a commentary and integrate it into your life. So it needs to be a question, there needs to be a conflict, and then there needs to be a cerebral conversation around it in order. And then through that, we can integrate these ideas. I mean, the Talmud just says there's a duality in the heart. And all of a sudden, we are now an hour later, we literally just did one line of Talmud today. That was our study. But we needed this to be able to process. Process is something in the educational experience that we don't give enough time to. Process. Just allow this to, what does it bring up? What does it conjure up? How do we experience it? This is really, really important. So and that's why I like this class. See, often if I'm teaching, I feel like I have to cover a certain amount of topic, whereas this class is purposely designed for process. So you're going to find that here it's much different than all the other classes that I teach, because this is a processing class. So maybe that's what you're touching at.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I
Alana.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
Hi, I just wanted to say, since just to follow up, a few people have used the word, stop, you need to stop, and before you can move on and so on. So in positive psychology, you actually use the word stop, and it stands for stop. The T is for take a breath. The O is observe what's going on around you. And then the P is for proceed. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
Never
but
heard
anyway,
that. Take a breath.
Stop.
Take a breath. Observe.
Observe. Proceed.
I love
Me-
that.
And it's actually very helpful. I mean, so a few of you have said it in different ways, but it's just an easy, reference, I would say.
Alana, that's my takeaway today. Stop, take a breath, observe, proceed. Love it. Stop, take a breath, observe, proceed. That's my takeaway. Alana, what's your takeaway? We'll start with you.
Well, I find it amazing how you always, touch something that's going on in my life. And so I'm going to share, you actually mentioned, surgery and all this. And my daughter's having surgery tomorrow. So I'm going to go move in with her today. So I'll be there to look after the baby, who she won't be able to lift for a couple of weeks. So I probably won't see you guys for a couple of weeks, because I'm going to be crawling around on the floor. But
Alana, what's her name?
her name is Ariel.
Ariel, and your name, Alana, right?
Ilana, yeah.
Okay, Ariel Bat Alana. We're going to pray for her. Thank you for
Thank you.
sharing that with us, so we have the ability to pray for her.
Thank you. And I was actually hoping to come to Shavuos at BuzzMats, but that's not going to happen. But I will be thinking about you all. Yeah. Thank you.
Cheryl, do you want to go next? Cheryl and Bruce.
I don't really have any takeaways because so many things are swirling, but I thank you for your, I don't know what, I hate to say put in a box, but your explanation of the Kabbalah not verses, but differences, as I had mentioned before, between actual Torah study and action. So that's my biggest takeaway, but love all of your comments and input today. Thank you.
I keep thinking during this whole class today about the serenity prayer, which is done in AA, as far as God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And a lot of me, I've got to try to stick to something like that because, there's a lot of times I get worked up and all anxious about things that, first of all, 99% of the time they turn out fine. And second of all, I get overly worked up about something that I can't control at all.
Mm.
So, like you said, a lot of things that way, I think the stop I really like. So I've got to integrate that one too into
Thanks,
my life.
Alana. I've heard that before, but I'm
Yeah.
going to write it down.
But thank you.
Thank you. Alessandra.
Refoua shlema le'Ariel, first and foremost. And I'm back to the animal soul and the godly soul, really, and about how one and the other are in the driver's seat when it comes to my life. But I find that thanks to the teachings, again, I'm more capable of, I love the French expression, faire la part des choses, which means, dividing things and putting them where they belong. And as Bruce was saying, there's so much that we can't control. There's no reason to stress over it, but the only thing we can control is how we react to it, as you taught us so many times. So these are my mixed up takeaways for today.
Thank you. Kelsey.
It's hard to pick one thing today. It actually, I think, came from the conversations. I think it's really interesting about the $75,000. And then increasing your quality of life past that. And then the stop. I think I'm gonna teach my son that. I think that's a great thing to start integrating into his life. So yeah, and it was just good to see everyone. I'm so happy I was able to make it today.
Thank you for coming. It's great. Lola and her mommy.
I thank you for the sentence, integrate what we study into who we are. This I like that succinct little thought that is a lifetime practice. And my biggest takeaway is sheer just gratitude, Rabbi, for you teaching and leading these discussions and every single person in this room.
Oh,
So grateful.
you're way too cool.
Oh, sorry. I'm taking away the spotlight. Okay.
Mhm.
It depends how you feel.
It depends on how you feel.
Mhm.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Lola. And Jill?
There's so much going around in my head. There was a lot in these very short time. This very short time. I think my takeaway is just at the end when, Alana, thanks for sharing about your daughter, and I feel like it's a privilege to be able to put someone I don't know in my prayers, and it just kind of struck me as the rabbi talked about that, and it feels like a good purpose. So that's going to be my takeaway. Thank you.
And Fami?
Okay, thank you. So I don't take your word as the repeat. It's not a joke because it's the same thing as the concept of tshuva. So when you say, God, I make a mistake, I won't do it again. What he will do is like in a class. You fail a class, you will have another exam. You'll have another exam, but maybe different words here and there, maybe different question asked differently, but you will be put in the same exact position. Yeah, it happened to me, the rabbi. So you will be put exactly in the same position, and he will see you.
Yeah.
Did you succeed or did you fail? So this is how. So I don't take your word as lightly. It's true. You have to. it will come back if you
Thank
don't solve it.
Yeah. Thank you. Wow. MJ.
I came a bit late. But when I came, what I heard is you saying that if a certain themes keep coming back, it's linked to your purpose. I mean, if I logged in just for that, that's pretty cool. And I'm not sure if this is because I'm hearing all the nuggets of everyone. I'm not sure if it's recorded or not, but I would love to be able to hear the rest. But just to hear that part is great because I am searching for something. So, and in the same token, I think I want to say the same thing a bit like Celeste. Thank you so much for being available like that and to share, because sometimes, like, anyways, personally, I struggle with certain things, and sometimes I just come, thank goodness, at the right time, at the right moment to hear the right sentence or the right word to just make sense into certain perception I have. And that's it really.
Thank you. And Jen, you're last.
I'll say thank you as well. And I was feeling really burnt out on efforts for, healing and self-improvement, both mentally, physically, and spiritually. I just felt like, I think burnt out is the best way to describe it. And I just want to say thank you for this class, because I'm feeling like, okay, all right, there's more positive and more hopeful and more like, okay, I can get back to it. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. Think good will be good. So for those of you who are joining me for Talmud, we'll start. If you're joining me tonight, I'll see you tonight. If you're joining me tomorrow night, we'll see you tomorrow night, or Sunday morning, or Monday morning, or but for those of you who I'm not going to be celebrating Shavuot with, may you accept the Torah this year with joy and with pnimiut. May it internalize. And that's really what we spoke about today. Most importantly, the idea of taking the Torah and internalizing it and making it part of us and allowing it to affect our behavior to the point where maybe in Kelsey's question that maybe it could change our fight or flight. Maybe, I don't know. And we'll have to continue that conversation, but at least that we can rededicate ourselves this weekend to the Torah and to see that it is the guidebook, and the first commandment, which is Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am Hashem your God, uses both ways of looking at God, both the loving kindness, the chesed, and the Gevorah. It's the same God. I am Hashem your God, both in the loving kindness and in the severity, in the good times and in the bad. And don't forget that I took you out of Egypt, that at any time you can be free. I took you out of the house of slaves. That's not even a commandment. It's just station identification. We call it the first commandment, but it's really just, hi everybody, I'm God, both in the good times and bad. And I took you out of Egypt from the house of slaves. Just want to let you know, I'm that one who made you free. And at every moment, the good times and bad, you have the moment to choose to be free. May we all choose to be free. And have a wonderful, wonderful, and a very happy holiday. On to Talmud.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.